Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to this video overview on Logic Pro 10. In this video, I'll just share some of my initial thoughts and concerns about Logic Pro 10, which came out today, and finally, after 4 years of waiting, we finally have an update to Logic Pro 9, Logic Pro X from Apple. So I'm very happy to see this, especially as a user. I've been using this since Logic Pro 6. So I was getting a little worried that we weren't going to have Logic anymore since we hadn't seen an update since, since I think 2009. So it's been a while. So here's Logic Pro 10. One of the first pros of Logic Pro 10 is that you can run both version 9 and 10 at the same time. Now, as you probably have heard, Logic 10 is a 64-bit application, which means that it taps into your processor's 64-bit processing, which is great. The downside is that you can't use some of the 32-bit plugins that you could use in Logic 9. So if there's a plugin that you find you need to use from version 9 that you can't use in 10, well, you can always go render the effect in 9 and then just open up the project in version 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up an existing project that we have. And I'm just going to go to my Logic folder, and I have this, it's just an instrumental rock tune called Alt Rock 1. Let's open that up. When you open up a Logic Pro 9 file in Logic 10, what it does is it prompts you to create a new folder for the session. So I'm just going to call this new song. And it's going to create a new Logic Pro 10 session folder, project folder. So it loads the song. Some other things just to keep in mind while this is loading is that Logic 10 only runs on Mountain Lion, which is Mac 10.8. So if you're working with Lion or Snow Leopard or Leopard, it's not going to run on those platforms. You got to make sure you update to Mountain Lion. And pretty much everything that, all the problematic things about Lion have been worked out in Mountain Lion. And of course, it'll work on the new operating system coming out this fall, Mavericks. I'm assuming it'll immediately work on that. So here's our new arrange window. Everything is, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that everything is pretty much the same. All of the instruments, the tracks, aux tracks, the routing, inserts are pretty much the same from Logic 9 into Logic 10. The difference is that in version 10, the GUI is completely different. The upside is it's got a nice, cool, sleek look to it. The downside is it looks kind of like GarageBand. That's my main criticism of the new GUI. And my other criticism is that you'll find that you'll waste a lot of time just trying to figure out the new GUI. Everything's pretty much in the same place. Things have been altered slightly, but for the most part, once you get over working with the new GUI, it'll be fine. One of the main things I actually love about Logic 10 is that the transport is on top. I love that. I hated having the transport on the bottom. I use Pro Tools a lot too, and I'm so used to having the transport on top. And I just felt like that Logic's transport on the bottom was just wasted space. The other thing is if you still use the toolbar icons that were up here in Logic 9, you can click on this icon right here. What it does is it shows a lot of those toolbar icons. So if you still want to use those, you can. They're right there. All right, let's jump into our session here. One of the things that you'll be prompted to do when you start Logic the first time is you'll be asked to use the old set of plugins, or the old set of key commands, or the new set of key commands. I'm fairly certain most of the old key commands from Logic 9 are pretty much the same as Logic 10. Opening up all the windows are pretty much the same. Stop, start, back to beginning. They're all pretty much the same. So that's kind of nice. So let's listen to our session here. And let's see what we've got. Let's see if it plays properly. I have a session that's got guitar, drums, I got a MIDI bass, some software instruments, or one software instrument down there. So let's see if everything plays all right. So one of my initial concerns was that, maybe my plugins aren't going to work properly, maybe my instruments are not going to be there, my buses aren't going to work out properly. One of the awesome things about Logic 10 is that you can pretty much open up any Logic 9 file and it's just going to work, because Logic 10 has pretty much all of the plugins that Logic 9 had in it. All of the effects are there, all the same effects are there. All of the classic instruments are there, the ES2, the XS24, Evoc 20, those are all there, as well as some new instruments. So like there's a new drum kit designer, which I think it's cool for beginners, but I'd honestly just rather sample and program the drums myself, but it's kind of cool to have some new instruments. So everything pretty much works out of the box. One thing that has changed about the layout is that the inspector here, which can be hidden and shown just like in Logic 9, also to the left of that, you can open up your media library, so you can pick your presets and things like that over here, which used to be on the right side. So I kind of like that just because it seems like it wastes less space. It technically takes up the same amount of space, but I just like having everything on the left side as opposed to having stuff everywhere. So, all right, so that's kind of cool. Let's open up our inspector as well. Let's talk about our channel strips here. Channel strips are pretty much the same as in Logic 9. A few things have been redesigned, though. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command 2 just to open up my mixer so I can see all of my channel strips here. Looks like everything from my Logic 9 session has been maintained. There's an EQ, an EQ view. You can select the channel strip setting. One cool thing you can view is a gain reduction meter. If you're using a dynamic plugin like compression or a limiter, you can actually see the gain reduction on the track. That's kind of cool. One of the other things is that the channel strip signal flow makes a lot more sense to me. In addition to putting a MIDI effects insert at the top for your instrument tracks, the input, so basically your input's where your microphone or where your what your instrument is, your input's on the top of the channel strip rather than in the bottom of the channel strip. In Logic 9, you had an input and an output both at the bottom of the channel strip. It's the same way in Pro Tools. This just makes more sense to me because, if you're working with an instrument track like the XS24 here for my bass, you have a MIDI input, which comes in through the MIDI sequencer. Then any MIDI effects that are affecting it here, you can choose things like arpeggiator, chord trigger, which is the same thing as the chord memorizer in Logic 9. And then it goes through the input, which is the synthesizer, or on an audio track, it's going to be the microphone or the microphone input. You got your audio effects, your sends, and then the output. So I like the way that the signal flow is arranged. It reminds me a lot of Adobe Audition, where the Adobe Audition, where the inputs are on the top and the outputs are on the bottom. So that's kind of cool. Everything else is pretty much the same. One thing I was hoping for in Logic 10 that we didn't get was two knob pan knobs for stereo tracks. In Pro Tools, you get both a left and a right knob for pan, whereas in Logic you still just get the one knob for left and right. Just a little less control than you get in Pro Tools for panning, but it's not a huge issue. You can assign buses just like you could before. You can group your tracks just like you could before, and you can choose your automation modes here as well. All right, so that's the mixer. One other really big thing about Logic 9 is flex pitch. Now, as of version 9, we had flex time, which is a lot like Elastic Audio and Pro Tools. It lets you quantize and time compress, time expand audio. Flex pitch is cool because it basically takes the Melodyne plugin, which a lot of you guys probably have already used, and what Melodyne does is it opens up your audio waveform in kind of like a piano roll editor. It allows you to move your waveform up or down via pitch. Logic basically takes this sort of programming and embeds it right into the Logic interfaces. I think this is one of the flagship things that's great about Logic 10 is having flex pitch embedded directly into the programming rather than having to use an external plugin like Melodyne. So you can save yourself a little bit of money, and it's going to work better because it's embedded into the programming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my guitar lead here, and I'm just going to solo it. And I'm going to double click on it, which opens it up in the what used to be called the sample editor. Now it's called the track editor or the file editor. You can choose between track and file. Now track basically shows you a larger zoomed in version of what you're doing here. File is a lot like the sample editor in Logic 9. So I'm going to go back to track. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on flex. Do you want to turn on flex? Yes, we do. And what you can do is you can choose a flex mode, just like we could in Logic 9, monophonic, polyphonic, slicing, rhythmic, speed, tempophone. But one new one up here is flex pitch. So let's choose flex pitch. Now, with flex pitch, what this does is it analyzes your waveform. And in addition to showing your waveform in the background, also gives you a piano roll view of what you're seeing pitch-wise. So if there's a note that's out of tune, or maybe you want to change a note to fit the key of the song better, you can simply just click on it and drag it up or drag it down. So let's say that this used to be a G here. Let's say we want this G to be a C. Let's just pull this C all the way up. And we're just going to double click here on the ruler to play this back. Maybe I want this F here to be like an E flat. So obviously the main thing this is meant for is for vocals, so you can go in, you can fine tune your vocals just like you can in Melodyne. You can create natural or unnatural pitch effects with your vocals. I'm using it with guitar because there's no vocals in this track. All right, so let's close that out. Actually, one quick thing with flex time in Logic 9 that we didn't have before is flex mode automatic, which with flex mode automatic, what it does is it basically chooses an algorithm that best fits the material that you're working with. So flex time basically said, well, slicing is the best for this material. So you don't have to go through and figure out which one sounds the best. You just choose automatic, and it'll automatically pick which algorithm works best for the material that you're analyzing. All right, so let's unsolo that track. A couple other things. The MIDI effects. Let's go back to the mixer here. In previous versions of Logic, you had to go into the MIDI environment, which was Window, and then you go down to Open MIDI Environment or Command 8. And the MIDI environment's basically a way for you to route instrument track into some sort of like a MIDI effect, like an arpeggiator, chord memorizer, line delay, things like that. The environment's still here. If you like doing things the old school way, it's still there. One of the things I love about version 10 is that all of your instrument tracks have this MIDI effects insert, and you can choose an arpeggiator, a chord trigger, which is the same thing as a chord memorizer, modifier, modulator. So there's all these different MIDI effects that we can add here instead of having to work within the old school MIDI environment. So that's kind of nice. If you're working mostly with electronic music, this is a great thing that they've added. A couple other things that we have in Logic 10, more control surface support. This also includes the euphonics controller, so like the Artist Series stuff, which are pretty popular right now. Also, if you have an iPad, you can actually control your mixer with an iPad, which is kind of nice. I haven't tested that out yet, but I have an iPad, but I haven't tested it out yet. That's kind of cool. You can use your iPad as a control surface. Let's see. We went over inserts. Yeah, one other thing is with all of your inserts, when you hover over an insert, you get this kind of three-part icon here. You get on and off, so you can bypass it, turn it on and off. You can click on it to show the insert, and then you can also click on the up and down arrow to choose a different plugin. So it's kind of nice. Before we had to use a plugin, or excuse me, not a plugin, we had to use a key command to turn on or off or bypass a plugin. Here now we can just hover over it and choose what we want to do without having to use a key command. So that's kind of nice. And lastly, my last pro is it's still only $199.99. It's still the most competitively priced DAW in the market. Pro Tools will cost you upwards of $600 or $700 if you're not a student. If you're a student, it's still like almost $300. So it's pretty much the cheapest, most bang for your buck DAW that's available on the market, and they haven't upped the price at all. Logic 9 as a download, it was $199.99. So unfortunately, you can't get it as a boxed version anymore. You can only do it as a download. So, and one of the other issues is if you already have version 9, there's no upgrade pricing. As I recall, when I had version 8, when I upgraded to 9, it was only $129 for the upgrade. So that's one downside. Some other cons. We said before, no upgrade pricing. 32-bit plugins won't work, although all my Wave stuff works, all my Native Instrument stuff works. But for instance, my Stillwell plugins, my Chrysonic plugins don't work yet because they don't have 64-bit support. What I said before, the interface is nice and sleek, but it's way different than versions 9 and 8. It looks a little garage bandy, and you'll find you'll spend most of your time just trying to relate the new GUI to the old GUI. There's still no VST support, but I doubt that'll ever happen. Pretty much you're still stuck with AU only. No 32-bit float bit depths, surprisingly. And then lastly, no audio to MIDI functionality. If any of you guys saw the there was an article that came out a little while ago. Apple actually patented audio to MIDI functionality, the same sort of functionality that Ableton Live 9 now has. We haven't gotten audio to MIDI yet in Logic. I'm not sure when we will or if we ever will, but I just thought it was odd that Apple patented that but didn't include it in Logic 10. So. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a pretty impromptu video, more or less my just initial reactions to Logic 10. I literally just downloaded it a few hours ago. Initial thoughts, I love it. Downsides, just a few things that could be tweaked later on. Maybe there'll be things that'll come in a future update like 10.1 or 10.2. Overall, I'm loving it. I just feel like I'm going to have to take a lot of time to learn the new GUI just to familiarize myself with it. But overall, looks nice, looks sleek, works really well. You can pretty much open anything from Logic 9 and Logic 10 and it'll work just fine. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and have a great night. Bye-bye.